This week on the Jerusalem Post podcast, the podcast hosts David Soucy, founder of the Israel Tree Service, who was in an interview with the Jerusalem Post in 2021 discussing concerns over fires that could break out due to negligence in terms of treatment of dead trees in the Jerusalem area. And just a few months after that report, indeed, we did see fires in the Jerusalem area. Now in 2025, following the fires in Jerusalem that we saw last week, we brought him back to discuss what preventative measures should have been taken, what preventative measures should be taken in the future, and what could be done in order to heal the forest fire results now. This is the Jerusalem Post podcast. I'm your host, Tamar Uriel-Beeri, editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Report, and I am joined once again by domestic affairs and economics correspondent Eve Young.
Hi, Tamar. Can I say it, or are you going to say it? We're also joined this week by Levi, Tamar's 2-year-old son. You may hear him in the background, and I'm
or
happy
maybe in the foreground shouting his head off
Levi,
because he is hyperactive.
You can go down. You could do it.
Yeah,
You could do it.
He's having a.
You could do it. It's not too high. Do you want some help from Mama? Okay.
Yeah,
she can do it all, and she can have it all.
Yeah,
but it's really hard at the same time.
Really hard, and poor Levi wasn't allowed to go to daycare today, not because of the teachers' strike, which is sort of going on, sort of not in his age group, nevertheless. Anyway, there is a teachers' strike, however, that happened on Sunday. It happened only for a few hours, and it was due to significant salary cuts that teachers face, as well as just worsening of conditions. Nevertheless, so they did see significant condition worsening across the board, most significantly in the salary department. And within a few hours, the finance ministry made some concessions, which the teachers union agreed to, but a lot of teachers nevertheless kind of had their own unofficial protest, just opposing the fact that this concession was not enough and didn't meet the demands that they were expecting to be met. I should say this was agreed to unofficially. Nothing has been signed in terms of a formal agreement. That's so cute. I don't know to what extent you guys can hear the microphones and the distance between them and my son, but he is very excited about seeing me on the monitor in the other room.
Yeah.
Anyway, so conditions not great. Surprising steadfast support from the education ministry, saying that the finance ministry is kidding themselves, including the education minister, Yoav Kish, who has said, I stand by the teachers 100%. They are doing the Lord's work and they need to be compensated accordingly, and they are being treated like trash. And that is to be appreciated and to be recognized. Nevertheless, the struggle seems to be continuing on an unofficial capacity, and currently they're kind of in this gray zone, but this has impacted parents, pointing at myself for those listening just on audio, significantly. And it has been quite the challenge.
The great sick leave strike of 2015. What year are we? 2025. The great sick leave strike of 2025.
It's not 2015 at all.
So that's been one of the methods, right? Is because this, first of all, on Sunday, I believe, the courts decided the strike had to end at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
Right. So it was like a 2-3 hour strike. And then following that,
very few teachers actually stood by that. They most teachers just didn't come in that day.
But in terms of what the court allowed, it was only till 10 a.m. And then I believe already by Monday, the teachers, or midday Monday, the teachers union had come to agreements with the Treasury, and then teachers unofficially continuing the strikes today. I think that's always really interesting to see, right? To see the union kind of teachers saying to the union, you're not adequately representing us.
Well, I think it's
enough.
Outside of teachers specifically, generally speaking, it's something that in Israel we see quite often. There's a union holding a government accountable, and there's the people holding the union accountable.
Yeah.
And for example, with Ha'istadrut, the Israeli National Union, Labor Federation, which is a kind of national union in function, that happens to be the case quite often.
Although I think often the unions have so much power themselves that it's really the union calling the shots. So here it's very interesting to see the teachers taking it into their own hands. You already touched on the political side. I saw a quote that I found to be really interesting, where Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said to the teachers, look at all these reservists who are doing everything for their country. How can it be that the teachers are striking over a few percentages in their pay? And I think that is like the epitome of disconnect, right? Because the burdens of the war, the economic burdens of the war, have been falling disproportionately on the middle class in some ways. Of course, the weaker class are super, super badly hurt by them. But like a lot of the kind of concessions have been made by the middle class. Increased public transportation fares, tax changes. Like the weight of this war is falling on Israel's working class. And for Smotrich to come out and say, oh, the Miluimnikim, they're fighting and giving their lives for you. How dare you be upset over a few percentage pay cut?
This is also after he has pushed for a budget cut for these same reservists. Supported a limiting the funding for Miluimnikim and also cutting their Miluim short for those who are there for like Chamshushim, which is like Sunday through Thursday. He supported actually counting it day by day rather than counting it as a week.
I mean, the Treasury is trying to figure out all these problems with how they pay reservists, because some reservists really are doing 2 days of work but being paid for 7 days of work in the army, which obviously we all want to see reservists be well paid and compensated for their incredibly difficult work. But the Treasury is doing all kinds of things to try to like tighten their belt wherever they can. Tighten the belt wherever they can. But disproportionately, it's falling on working class, and teachers have been fighting for their salaries for years, and they're chronically underpaid.
This is not a new issue in Israel as well as around the world. But I think
the quote was just like the epitome of the disconnect of the government from the difficulty and challenges they are posing to the productive working class in the country.
I will say again, I did appreciate that the education ministry really did come forward and say like, no, this is a very much needed, valid argument by the teachers, and I appreciated that. And it's kind of not often these days that you see the ministry standing up for the people that they represent, because a lot of the time you see kind of the opposite. Like until now, until Ben-Gurion hired, for example, in under the National Security Ministry, there's the police and stuff. Until he hired the leadership within the police and kind of created that switch around, he was very much in opposition with everybody in the police. He still is with a lot of the leadership in the police. That's just an example. Like they're not necessarily also you saw comments from members of the defense ministry, blaming the army for October 7th. They're just not really defending the people that they have been sworn in, so to speak, to defend. And that's an issue. Speaking of defense ministry, we have seen comments now from Hamas saying that they are, due to the increased action in the Gaza Strip by the IDF, which was announced earlier this week, and we saw a huge wave of reservists being called in. As a result of that, as well as the actual action on the ground, Hamas said, we are not interested in hostage ceasefire talks at this time. It's just not going to happen right now. Again, grain of salt, these things get reported and then misreported and then re-reported and then unreported. But this is the current thing on the table.
We were just talking about this in the news desk earlier, that it's like there's so many reports that are all contradictory. Right. On the one hand, a high level official will come out and say, we're doing our best. We're talking to Hamas. We're doing as much as we can.
Right.
And then on the other hand, you have Hamas saying what's going on. And also, like, is it possible? And like, then you have the deadline for Hamas, like, Israel saying, if you negotiate with us within 2 weeks, then there's what to talk about. But at the same time as they're like actively expanding operations in Gaza. So it's also a bit ridiculous to be like, we're negotiating as we bring troops in. Like, I think everyone in this story is confusing and saying confusing things, and it's impossible to know what's going on.
And also it's impossible to separate person from agenda, which is understandable.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to speaking publicly, Hamas has not necessarily been the most forthcoming and honest.
Hamas, not forthcoming or honest?
I know. Wouldn't this terrorist organization actually really have a vested interest in being extremely honest?
Hostages and like raped women and killed people, but I thought that they drew the line at dishonesty in the press.
They're actually a really Kantian organization.
Like the truth is what guides us.
Oh, good Lord Almighty. Yeah. I just want to say for our listeners that you guys can't hear this, but my son is currently in the feed room and he's watching us, and every 2 seconds I hear him scream, "Mama!" And then the next second I hear him scream, "Bluey," like asking for Bluey to be put up on the screen. So.
And we also hope that you can't hear this, but maybe you can. Who knows?
Oh, that would be really funny if everybody just imagine if fully there's a microphone in there, they can't hear us, they just hear my son screaming, "Mama!"
Or just like in the background. I feel like it's We've heard Reuven in the background of recordings before.
Oh yeah, so maybe you do hear
Our
him.
audio
His
editor yelling at
voice is
us.
very cute, so you're welcome. You know what? Another situation within this war is that Yemen has kind of restarted. The Houthis, rather, in Yemen have restarted their pretty significant, consistent attacks on Israel. The most significant of which caused a missile crash near Ben-Gurion Airport. We were just discussing this before, that the reports from the IDF have been kind of unclear as of yet, to our knowledge up until this point, whether it was the actual missile landing or it was shrapnel.
Or a fragment of the missile, yeah.
Yes, nevertheless. Nevertheless, there was a huge kaboom. The videos were frightening and hilarious. Hilarious simply because it's like people freaking out over it and people's reactions, despite like it being horrible and people being injured, and it's a terrible thing that happened. But there was one where I saw a guy go, yo, Willie. And it was the funniest, and it was like the most human, innate, instinctive reaction to a genuinely frightening situation. And it made me think, what would I do if I saw a genuinely horrifying situation happen in front of me? Like, what would my reaction be? Probably like turn and run. But like that, like initial like battle cry, like, I don't know.
What would be the thing you would yell?
I would probably just be cursing my head off. I swear like a sailor. It's really bad. And I could see myself doing that. What about you?
Oh, I don't know. No good ideas.
Well, there are no good ideas. We're talking about how you...
I really like to hope that I would never be in that situation.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. It's a crazy situation. Like
it is.
It's absolutely wild. It's the first, right, since the beginning of the war that impact has been made near the airport. Israel
obviously, every airline except the Israeli airlines have immediately canceled every flight.
No, they've only canceled. I've actually been surprised by their kind of restraint, right? They've canceled flights through mid next week, some of them canceled flights for 24 hours. Not sure if they actually resumed or pushed it back because Israel attacked expansively. This is like the next part of the news story.
Yeah,
like we expansively attacked in Yemen
alongside the US.
Along with the US. But they've been kind of restrained, although I don't think it bodes well.
Right.
Are we going back to the days when the only options to fly are El Al, and El Al prices are
skyrocketing? I know that it right after all of those airlines canceled their flights, the El Al stock just spiked like crazy. I think like it saw it like the last time I saw it, it was like a 6% spike. It was crazy. Yeah. So let's hope for all our sakes, especially us who are dual citizens, Olim, all that jazz.
Anyone who wants to go on vacation from this tiny, tiny country.
Yes, but I will take the privilege and right of feeling like people whose families live abroad have like a bit more of a justification in being genuinely upset. Obviously everybody does, but I just feel like that's where it really stings.
There's this one meme that my sister sends when she's feeling like traumatized or stressed.
Is it the dog sitting in the middle of a fire? I knew it.
No, not in the middle of the fire. No.
Oh.
It's a little dog, like a chihuahua, a picture of him.
And it's stretching its little fingers?
Nope.
There's so many memes that you could be describing. I'm so sorry.
It's a little dog overlaid with like helicopters in the background. Yes. And the implication is that helicopter dog is like traumatized from his experience in Vietnam War.
PTSD dog.
PTSD dog, helicopter dog.
I think that's what it's called.
And that's become what I say to myself whenever I'm feeling like stressed about something recurring. So
I love how the two other memes that I mentioned could also be relevant.
They could also work. But basically right now I'm feeling very helicopter dog about El Al canceling flights.
Well, El Al's not canceling flights. Everybody else canceled flights,
about being
and
stuck
therefore
with El Al as everyone canceled flights,
yeah.
and I'm feeling very helicopter dog about the whole thing.
I'm feeling very this is fine dog about the whole thing.
That's good. That's better. I'd rather feel
this is fine dog is just a dog sitting at his kitchen table while his house is on fire around him, and he's saying this is fine
with a little mug. He's a little mug.
With a little mug. Yes, he's drinking from a little mug.
I'm feeling very helicopter dog.
Fun fact that somebody had like erased the table and the dog from that image and just left the house on fire. So you could use it as a Zoom background during COVID-19, and that was my regular Zoom background back when I was in college at the time.
But you know what else I'm feeling helicopter dog from? I know I'm taking us back a little bit, but
also
the expanded fighting. All of our friends suddenly having call-up notices, and my friends being in Gaza, and
it's really frightening.
And the hostage families saying, "What are you doing?"
Right.
And the prime minister coming out. And remember at the beginning of the war when they first announced the war goals, they didn't even mention the hostages until there was public uproar. Once again, the prime minister has come out and said the main goal is Hamas. The hostages are a secondary goal. And I'm feeling extremely helicopter dog about all of this. And I think that's a public sentiment. I think a lot of the public is feeling very like, what is going on? Why are you doing this again? in the past few days, we've once again, after the ceasefires, come back to the news cycles where 6 a.m. every morning we get notice that another soldier has died.
Yeah.
We get more propaganda videos from Hamas, or more signs of life, honestly, is also what they are. Of
We've
the
just
hostages.
gone full throttle back into where we were.
And I feel extremely helicopter dog about it. And
is helicopter dog your like millennial way of saying like I'm feeling triggered? Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
You could just be triggered. This could be like a deeply concerning feeling. That's
helicopter dog. Everyone should look at the picture. Maybe we can like attach it somewhere in show notes. We'll do show notes for the podcast.
We'll do annotations in
but his little eyes are blank,
footnotes,
and he's just looking out to the distance, and his face just says, "Oh my God, please help me something." And I think that's a common vibe in Israel right now. And our editorial was on it this morning.
Yes.
Tuesday morning, our editorial was, the public needs an explanation because we are going to a scary place and we don't know why. And the public no longer has.
And also we don't know what exactly this scary place is. And
the public no longer trusts its leadership to lead it through this scary place in a sensible way.
Which is like a pretty consistent sentiment in the public sphere and has not been addressed because obviously the government wouldn't want to address it because it would mean questioning their own
validity of the war,
or their own responsibility, their actions. And that is not something.
Speaking of responsibility of the government this week struck down forming a state probe, a state official commission of inquiry into October 7th, leading to outrage among bereaved families who say they deserve real answers. Levi's just yelling in the background, and I'm with him. He sounds the way I feel.
He is fired up and furious about the commission of inquiry being shot down.
Honestly, same. And the majority of Israelis want this state probe. So I think that's a pretty public sentiment that the idea, like, it's not just the crisis of trust between Israelis and institutions. It's also the fact that generally critical thinkers and logical people don't think that those being examined should also be leading the examination, right? We don't think that criminals should lead their own investigations against them.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it again.
Do it.
I'm going to do the John Mulaney reference again.
John Mulaney reference. Oh, the horse.
If there's a horse at loose in a hospital, the horse has fired the horse catcher.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like no one sensible thinks that those who are being examined can examine themselves objectively.
Yeah.
It's just not how it works.
Yeah.
And the Israeli public doesn't think that. And they want like a real actual examination of the biggest crisis that this country has ever seen.
So amongst those who are directly involved, who would be within the commission of inquiry, whether, you know what it's, and that's where it really is, it's the Knesset or the judiciary. The kind of fear is, okay, who's gonna like have to sponge up the blame, so to speak. And the government's opposition to a state commission of inquiry is that the second that there are people involved that aren't government officials, they will blame the government. But that's not considering the fact that in this state commission of inquiry structure, there would also be representatives of the government. So it's not that you are unrepresented. What you are demanding is a full
control
of it without any external and the importance within the structure of democracy, of checks and balances, of having evenly distributed responsibilities, of having external entities critiquing. You can't it's like you said, you can't critique yourself. It's so very basic to the fundamentals of democracy, and things are not up to standard. Another thing that things are not up to standard on, and have not been for quite a few years, is the precautions that need to be taken when it comes to forestry in the country and arbory. And that has seemingly been one of the contributing factors. Of course, there are also people being irresponsible with fires. There is the fear of arson. But that has been a contributing factor to the massive fires that we saw last week surrounding Jerusalem and almost like edging into Jerusalem a little bit.
Such a good transition.
Thank you.
Really good transition.
Thank you. Smooth AF. Anyway, it was, first of all, for anybody in Jerusalem, I think I can speak, very scary situation to be in. Literally not knowing how to escape and feeling trapped and cut off from the rest of the country. But our interviewee this week, David Soucy, he is a very, very experienced forester from Canada who kind of pointed out to the authorities in charge of Israel's natural parks and such about the concerns of them not creating biodiversity and therefore raising the risks of forest fires. And right after he had laid out a potential plan for them, and this was sent to them in an official capacity, that was when the 2021 fire broke out. Now it's 2025, and we're seeing that once again. So we brought him in once again to discuss it. So with that, I'm going to take it away with our interview. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So this isn't the first forest fire that Israel has experienced. Even in the past few years, we had one in 2010, one of the Carmel fires, which started the fire and rescue services. Another in 2016, again a Carmel fire, and then in 2021, right here in Jerusalem, which now in 2025, it feels like a bit of a flashback. You said you had a bit of, before we started rolling, you said you had a bit of an experience with the 2021 fires. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I had just made Aliyah from Canada, and I was on my way to Mizrad Apnim, I was getting my ID, and I had seen a bunch of dead standing wood that were all pines. As you know, most of Jerusalem is pine trees.
Right.
And so in Canada, we also have a lot of pine trees, and I don't know if you guys are aware of what turpentine is. Turpentine is like it's an old paint thinner. Basically, it's extremely flammable. It's like it's basically like gas.
Okay.
And turpentine is distilled from pine trees.
Really?
So basically, what that means is that pine trees are extremely flammable. Okay. So even if they're alive, they're still very flammable. And what the problem was that there's all these pine trees, and a lot of them are dead, which was from the previous forest fire before. And so then when the dead wood starts, it lights everything else. And so I had seen that because I did some forest fire prevention back in Canada on Vancouver Island. And I had gotten a friend of mine to write a Hebrew letter into Kakal and also the area. This was like in the area of Jerusalem Valley, from Meveseret coming towards Jerusalem. And a few months later, sure enough, there was a very big fire. Exactly right there. And they ended up spending, I have to mention, I had sent them a proposal of like what could be done. So there's a lot of companies in the area that sell firewood for people. So you could hire like a bunch of people to come in and cut the dead trees. They're already dead.
Right.
It's basically just standing kindling, ready to light everything else on fire. So cut that wood, chop it up, and get people that are already selling wood to come and make furniture out of it or sell it for firewood. It's a very low-cost budget fix and solution, right? I think they ended up spending 8 million shekels in 2 days just to put that forest fire out. So, and again, also, like you were saying, there has been previous forest fires here, and it's repeating now, even just last week. It's repeating because, so basically, there's two major organizations that are basically one. It's Kakal and JNF, the Jewish National Fund in Israel. And what they do is they're basically responsible for planting trees. I think in the last 30 years, I speak under correction, I think 250 million trees were planted. Oh, wow. So it's really significant. But the issue is that they're just planting a bunch of the same trees, and a lot of them are pines, oren in Hebrew, and we're not bringing back the native species of Israel and also the Jerusalem area.
What are those?
So a few of those is the alon, the oak tree. And the big thing with people, they say, okay, so don't all trees just light and burn? Not necessarily. So an oak tree has, the forest fires in California that we hear about all the time?
Yeah.
And the sequoias and the redwoods?
Yeah.
They're the ones still standing even though there's a forest fire, and there's a reason for that. Their bark is about this thick.
Oh, wow.
Which means the fire cannot get to the wood to light it. It's a protection thing.
Okay.
And so the key is to have one, biodiversity, so you don't have all the same kind of trees in the area. Because what happens is if you have a pest that comes in and let's say it kills all the pine trees.
Right.
Now all the pine trees, all the trees are now dead, which means it's just a giant like tinderbox ready to ignite, right? When you have biodiversity, where you have different trees, like the oak tree. It's also it's deciduous, which means the leaves fall and it creates like bioorganisms in the ground, which means that more trees can grow as well.
Cool.
And as well, there's natural bugs that eat each other. So let's say, when I'm sure your like grandparents planted a garden, you don't plant potatoes in the same spot every year. Because what happens is there's like potato bugs it's called crop rotation.
Yeah.
So we do that, and we're aware of companion planting and gardening in agriculture. In arboriculture, we don't do that here in Israel, but we do that everywhere else. So anyways, all that to say, the oak tree, right? So the oak tree is a native species to this area.
Right.
The Olon Tabor, like the Tabor winery and stuff we have.
Yeah.
So the bark is extremely thick, which means it's naturally fire resistant.
What's the reason that Kakale isn't planting alone?
I think there's
didn't.
I think so. I think there's a few reasons, and one is you can only do so much with the funds that are allocated to you. Kakal is only getting funds from the government and the JNF, and they're only allocating them a certain amount of funding per year. But I think a bigger reason to that is just there's a general lack of education in Israel as to how to properly manage forests.
Right.
Israel is a very young country. We have people from all over the world that have moved here. And we've basically regreened the land where it used to just be really desolate and deserted, right? So a lot of tree species that are even here, like you see eucalyptus trees everywhere, they're not indigenous to Israel. They're actually from Australia. But they're great because they were able to soak up a bunch of water that were like in the marshlands.
Right.
But again, we have these trees growing that it's just a poor planning based on like, I think, a basic lack of education. And until that is fixed initially, like that's the root cause actually.
Do these fires tie into climate change, or are they cause?
Definitely, yeah, I think so. I was looking at the rate of heat and the climate rise from the 1990s to now, which is about 20 to 30 years. It has significantly gone up by a few degrees Celsius, which is like it's not nothing, right? So the heat is going up. There is such thing as climate change. It is heating up. But nonetheless, it doesn't mean that we can't prevent. So if you have trees that are able to withstand the heat, which we do, the native species of Israel are able to withstand the heat. They thrive in it. Under that canopy creates a microenvironment. So theoretically, we can actually create a cooler summer time in Israel if we have more trees, because it literally cools the air.
Wow.
So, and what happens is that it basically creates like a canopy, and underneath now the temperature is significantly lower, and also that means it gives room to be able to have different plant life that would just get completely parched out in the sun. Like,
otherwise,
you know what I mean? Like if you try to grow like a fern out in the desert, it's gonna die.
Yeah.
But if you try to plant it where there's enough vegetation and it's covered by trees and like a bunch of microorganisms, it has a chance.
So right now, what should Israel / these organizations be doing right now to kind of like regrow that?
It's definitely possible. I mean, I think also forest fires is a natural thing that happens in nature.
Right.
So
we're seeing that everywhere. Also.
Yeah. So to say that just all fires in nature are bad is also like the pendulum swinging the other way, because actually there's quite a few species that rely on natural forest fires every 50 to 100 years to actually disperse their seed. And they rely on that heavily. So if we take fire completely away, as well as carbon, right? Like when everything burns, the carbon goes back into the ground. It's an amazing fertilizer.
I think in Australia there was a ban, and it caused a huge problem because originally they were doing controlled fires, right?
Exactly. The indigenous people were doing controlled fires for thousands of years there, and then all of a sudden there was a ban, and it caused havoc in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, prevention is vital, like you said. Has the government, in your opinion, been doing enough in order to contribute in some way to these preventative measures that need to be taken?
I think that it's done a wonderful job in planting trees. But in the planning of a long-term type thing, it's sorely lacking. And I think that needs to be addressed, because if that's not addressed, whether it's you blame it on terrorism, whether you blame it on climate change, whether you blame it on someone having too much fun at the barbecue and lighting a fire, it doesn't matter. The problem is, if there's nothing there to burn, nothing's going to burn. So even if someone wants to start a fire, it's
not
there
gonna
is not, or it's going to be much more challenging for them to be able to start the fire.
Or
So
for the fire to spread.
Exactly. So I think this whole thing of who did what and who started it is irrelevant, because the forests in Israel, and we don't have that many. We really don't. So like in California or Canada, you hear about these massive fires happening. It's not the end of the world, because there's millions and millions of hectares of wood.
Right.
In Israel, we're this tiny little sliver, and within that, we really don't have that much forested area. So like the fire that just happened, it seriously affects the plant life and the tree life here in a big way.
Yeah. So walk us through like what happens next procedurally with like this. We have all this burnt area now. What happens then?
So from my understanding and what I've observed, nothing happens. Then that's the problem, because then you have all these trees that have been burnt, right? So a tree that's alive has a lot of sap in it, and a lot of it's like 70% water rate usually.
Right.
When a tree is dead, all that water comes out. That's why when you cut wood to like cook with it, you use seasoned wood. That just means that the water has evaporated out of the wood, and then you can use it to burn cleaner.
Right.
So what happens now is that we have all these dead trees that are standing there, and it's basically just like they're going to be ready to start again next year. So it's a vicious cycle. That's the issue. So what needs to happen is people need to go in, even if that means we use Thai workers for agriculture here all the time. They're great. They're very aware of how to like take care of trees. A simple thing would be, okay, let's have a whole movement of getting a bunch of workers and even getting communities involved. You know, if your community is surrounded by wood and everyone's aware that there could be a forest fire, there just needs to be like some organization from a community standpoint as well, because relying solely on the government here especially is like, it's not of course they should do something about it, but until they do something about it, something else
it's not the practical.
Yeah, it's not practical. I mean, like, yeah, I think it needs to definitely be a community thing. That's what happens as well in Canada, for example. It's like, yeah, you have the local like fire station and people are genuinely aware, but like to truly like manage the surrounding town or village, you know, the community has to get together, and it's a matter of somebody taking initiative and making that happen. And I just think that no one's going to do that, and not on a large enough scale, because there's a lack of education.
David, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to give it a like, comment, subscribe. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, jpost.com, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you get your podcasts. Be well.